Point number 6. Equitable and inclusive education. Learning for all. 6.1. Education is the single greatest tool for achieving social justice and equality. Inclusive and equitable education, while indeed an essential goal in its own right, is also critical to achieving an inclusive and equitable society in which every citizen has the opportunity to dream, thrive, and contribute to the nation. The equation system must aim to benefit India's children so that no child loses an opportunity to learn and excel because of circumstances of birth or background. This policy reaffirms that bridging the social category gaps in access, participation, and learning outcomes in school education will continue to be one of the major goals of all education sector development programs. This chapter may be read in conjunction with chapter 14, which discusses analogous issues of equity and inclusion in higher education. 6.2. While the Indian education system and successive government policies have made steady progress towards bridging gender and social category gaps in all levels of social education, large disparities still remain, especially at the secondary level, particularly for socio-economically disadvantaged groups that have been historically underrepresented in education. Socio-economically disadvantaged groups (SCDGs) can be broadly categorized based on gender identities, particularly female and transgender individuals, socio-cultural identities such as scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs and minorities, geographical identities such as students from villages, small towns and aspirational districts, disabilities including learning disabilities, and socio-economic conditions such as migrant communities, low-income households, children in vulnerable situations, victims of or children of victims of trafficking, orphans including child beggars in urban areas and the urban poor. While overall enrollment in schools declined steadily from grade 1 to grade 12, this decline in enrollments is significantly more pronounced for many of these SCDGs, with even greater declines for female students within each of these SCDGs and often even steeper in higher education. A brief status overview of the SCDGs that come within socio-cultural identities is given in following subsection. 6.2.1. According to UDI's 2016-17 data, about 19.6% of students belong to scheduled castes at the primary level, but this fraction falls to 17.3% at the higher secondary level. These enrollment drop-offs are more severe for scheduled tribe students and differently abled children, 1.1% to 0.25%, with even greater declines for female students within each of these categories. The decline in enrollment in higher education is even steeper. 6.2.2. A multiplicity of factors, including lack of access to quality schools, poverty, social mores, and customs and language, have had a detrimental effect on rates of enrollment and retention among the scheduled castes. Bridging these gaps in access, participation and learning outcomes of children belonging to scheduled castes will continue to be one of the major goals. Also, the other backward classes, OBCs, which have been identified on the basis of historically being socially and educationally backward, also need special focus. 6.2.3. Tribal communities and children from scheduled tribes also face disadvantages at multiple levels due to various historical and geographical factors. Children from tribal communities often find their school education irrelevant and foreign to their lives, both culturally and academically. While several programmatic interventions to uplift children from tribal communities are currently in place and will continue to be pursued, Special mechanisms need to be made to ensure that children belonging to tribal communities receive the benefits of these interventions. 6.2.4 Minorities are also relevantly underrepresented in school and higher education. The policy acknowledges the importance of interventions to promote education of children belonging to all minority communities, and particularly those communities that are educationally underrepresented. 6.2.5 The policy also recognizes the importance of creating enabling mechanisms for providing children with special needs, CWSN or Divyang, the same opportunities of obtaining quality education as any other world. 6.2.6 Separate strategies will be formulated for focused attention on reducing the social category gaps in social education as outlined in the following subsection. 6.3 The critical problems and recommendations regarding ECCE, foundational literacy and numeracy, access, enrollment and attendance discussed in chapters 1 to 3 are particularly relevant and important for underrepresented and disadvantaged groups. Therefore, the measures from chapter 1 to 3 will be targeted in a concerted way for SEDGs. 6.4 In addition, there have been various successful policies and schemes such as targeted scholarships, conditional cash transfers to incentivize parents to send their children to school, providing bicycles for transport, etc., that have significantly increased the participation of SEDGs in the schooling system in certain areas. These successful policies and schemes must be significantly strengthened across the country. 6.5 It will also be essential to take into account research that ascertains which measures are particularly effective for certain SEDGs. For example, providing bicycles and organizing cycling and walking groups to provide access to school have been shown to particularly powerful methods in increasing participation of female students, even at lesser distances, because of the safety benefits and comfort to parents that they provide. One-on-one teachers and tutors, peer tutoring, open schooling, appropriate infrastructure and suitable technological interventions to ensure access can be particularly effective for certain children with disabilities. Schools providing quality ECCE reap the greatest dividends for children who come from families that are economically disadvantaged. Meanwhile, counselors and or well-trained social workers that work with and connect with students, parents and schools and teachers in order to improve attendance and learning outcomes have been found to be especially effective for children in urban poor areas. 6.6 Data shows that certain geographical areas contain significantly larger proportions of SEDGs. Also, there are geographical locations that have been identified as aspirational districts which require special intervention for promoting their educational development. Hence, it is recommended that regions of the country with large population from educationally disadvantaged SEDGs should be declared special education zone, SEZs, where all the schemes and policies are implemented to the maximum through additional concerted efforts in order to truly change their educational landscape. 6.7 It must be noted that women cut across all underrepresented groups, making up about half of all SEDGs. Unfortunately, the exclusion and inequity that SEDGs face is only amplified for the women in these SEDGs. The policy additionally recognizes the special and critical role that women play in society and in shaping social mores. Therefore, providing a quality education to the girls is the best way to increase the education levels for these SEDGs, not just in the present but also in future generations. The policy thus recommends that the policies and schemes designed to include students from SEDGs should be especially targeted towards girls in these SEDGs. 6.8. In addition, the Government of India will constitute a gender inclusion fund to build the nation's capacity to provide equitable quality education for all girls as well as transgender students. This fund will be available to states to implement priorities determined by the central government, critical for assisting female and transgender children in gaining access to education, such as the provisions of sanitation and toilets, bicycles, conditional cash transfers, etc. Funds will also enable states to support and scale effective community-based interventions that address local context-specific barriers to female and transgender children access to and participation in education. Similar inclusion fund schemes shall also be developed to address analogous access issues for other SEDGs. In essence, this policy aims to eliminate any remaining disparity in access to education, including vocational education, for children from any gender or other socio-economically disadvantaged group.